All right. How's everybody doing today? We are here with Reuben Blundell, and I think I just messed it up, even though I just asked him Blundell, right?
I recognize
Blundell.
that. Very nice.
And we thank Reuben for being here. We were just having a quick conversation before we got started, just to kind of what we wanted to talk about today. And really, I just wanted to hear your story, Reuben, of like what's your music journey? Like, where did you start out first playing music?
Well, I mean, when I was 5, I started with a little bit of piano, and I didn't really practice. And my parents asked me if I liked it a lot, and I said, no, I don't know. And so then I didn't do piano, and I didn't do music for a while, and I'm a little sad about that,
Right.
because there's so much great music for the piano, and now being a conductor, which I am, I find piano very useful. So I still noodle from time to time. I can play all the notes on the piano because they're already there, which is great.
Yeah.
But so things started getting really more serious when I was 9 years old, and I heard the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. I was growing up in Melbourne, Australia, playing a concert, and I was very excited about it. I think it was a Beethoven symphony, and then I heard some Mahler, and I decided I wanted to play violin and become a conductor, maybe. I wasn't really sure what a conductor did, but I thought it was awesome. So I focused on the violin. I started going to a special high school where I had classes, because high school in Australia is from year 7. It had we would play in ensembles together. We had conductors. We did ear training every day as a part of what we, there was a lot of sight singing, a lot of English folk songs, because that's what they do in Australia.
Sure. The Queen's influence still there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so during that time, when I, being a kid in high school, I knew I wanted to conduct. And so I found ways to, there was a concert where we could do have our own music performed. We would all compose, everybody in year 9 would write a piece of music, and it would be played by the orchestra. And I got to conduct some of my friends' compositions as well as mine. So that was my first conducting, and mine was weird, of course, but the other kids wrote some really great music, and it was really fun to do. And so just sort of through high school and college, I conducted more and more, and I kept playing violin a lot. And I got to go to the Tanglewood Music Center, which is the Boston Symphony Orchestra's summer program. And I was a violinist there. And while I was there, I auditioned for the New World Symphony, which is a training orchestra that Michael Tilson Thomas started in Miami. And that was a wonderful experience. And
Wow.
From there, I went to Eastman, where I studied and got a doctorate in conducting, in orchestra conducting. Eastman is a wonderful music school. I think one of the most impressive things about Eastman is how much they focus on the academics of music, reading and analyzing and thinking about music from every angle.
Cool.
The stories of the music, the society of the music, and the construction of the music.
Right,
So
the humanities.
Sorry?
The humanities behind the music, right?
Right, so you can become a well-rounded musician. And there are other great universities and college programs, of course, that have this, but Eastman was particularly good. One of its great things is the isolation of living in Rochester, New York.
I lived in Pittsford, New York for right outside of Rochester for a very short period of time, just enough to go through one winter, and then my family was like, "We're moving back to Philadelphia area." So.
It's got great schools and wonderful musical programs.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yep. That's where the conducting teacher actually lives. Anyway, so it's wonderful stuff. And right out of Eastman, I got a job at Millersville University, which is one of the Pennsylvania state system colleges. It's just outside Lancaster.
Right.
And after a little while there, I started teaching at a different university in New York City, which is where I live now. And then from there, now one of the things that I do is I conduct at the Trinity School, which is a college prep school on the Upper West Side. Really amazing, wonderful school. So my youngest students are in grade 5 and 6. My oldest are in high school. But about 8 years ago, I also became music director. Was it 8? 7. Music director of the Lansdowne Symphony Orchestra. And because that means that I'm very active and busy in Delaware County,
Yes.
which is how I came to know.
And that's how we met each other. There's the story. Ray, good synopsis of getting you just got the whole life to how we got to here in 7 minutes. Pretty good.
Oh, thank you. Also, so one of the things I guess I'm supposed to, we were going to talk about is what it is to be music director of a symphony orchestra like Lansdowne. So Lansdowne is a wonderful orchestra. There are probably hundreds of community orchestras around America. Community music making in America I think it's really one of the wonderful things about American life. There are community music ensembles. Music isn't just something that you do, to earn money. It's something you do because it fills part of your soul.
Yes.
And so if what's more important, I think, in your studies is to think about music being a part of your life always. So the Lansdowne Symphony, it has some players in it who are or have been professional musicians. It also has people who, during the daytime, they're teachers or they're doctors, or we have a chemistry professor, we have a librarian, we have a medical researcher who's doing some of the research at the forefront of mitochondria and how cells process and turn energy into stuff.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of... Yeah,
it's all walks of life.
It's filled with amazing people. And once a week on a Tuesday evening, the orchestra comes together and we rehearse. And over the year, we do 5 or 6 full orchestra concerts. Most of our concerts are at the Upper Darby Performing Arts Centre, which some of you may know as the home of Summer Stage,
right?
Which is a fun musical that they put on musical productions, and during the summer. And it's a 2,000-seat theatre. And we do our concerts there, and sometimes we do other concerts out in the community, such as we did a Peter and the Wolf performance in Lansdowne at the Lansdowne Theatre, which is still being worked on, but some of it we did it in a part of the theatre you could use. Right. We've done performances at Lansdowne's 20th Century Club. We did a concert last year at the Kimmel Centre, in collaboration with Temple University's Global Engagement Program. So they brought over a conductor who conducted one of the pieces. They brought over a soloist from China who played a concerto with us. And it was a really fun program. Yeah. The
Kimmel Center, what a beautiful building, the Kimmel Center.
Right.
And right in Philadelphia, an amazing building, right?
It's just beautiful. Get there whenever you can.
Yes.
And
I played the lobby. I've played the lobby in the Kimmel Center. So, hey, it's a beautiful lobby, but I can technically say I played the Kimmel though. So that's cool.
We played in the second theater, what is it called? I'm going to say it wrong. We played in the second theater.
Okay.
Yeah. And the orchestra has done chamber music performances at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Up at the top of the stairway. Not the rocky stairs, the ones inside.
Right. Yeah. The ones that go around out, and there's the tapestries everywhere. I used to work for an event company, so we used to do a lot of events over at your events were much more cultural than the events that I was working.
It was really great to be a part of. It's always great when you can help as a music director, when you're presented with an opportunity that enables the organization that you lead to collaborate with other organizations, not just because that expands the audience, but it gets people to think about music in the many ways that it can be thought about. Music isn't just, it's not, I got to use a fancy word here, hermeneutic. It's not something that's like a hermit. It doesn't just sit off in its own. When it's part of something bigger, it's that much more interesting.
Right. And I think we're learning that even more so right now, where we're separated from each other and not performing together, that there's a disconnect in the playing. I know that in my lessons, that little millisecond even of delay makes it so we can't jam and play together. And like that just changes the whole dynamic. I think we're doing an amazing job, everybody, of trying to overcome those hurdles and find solutions using recording and different different platforms. I mean, there are platforms that people are playing live with each other around the world. It's not the same when you're actually in the same room and you feel this, you're breathing the same air. I know that's a little maybe too soon to be talking about breathing the same air, but sound travels on air. So when you're in the same room, feeling that air movement, it may not be enough for us to really perceive or measure, but as a human being, you feel it, right? You can go to what do they call the I can't remember the name of the phenomenon, but when you listen to a piece of music and you get chills, right? Like
I hope you can edit this down so it looks like we immediately think of the word.
No, we keep it all.
The word, I think, is it the word numinous?
I've not heard that term. I see. I know of it been turned. I mean that sounds good, so we'll go with it.
Okay.
But there's.
I think of numinous as that moment when you walk outside and it's dark and you look up and you see the skies and you realize. You see the stars in the sky and you realize that we're part of something that's far beyond, it's
right.
far greater than any individual sense of the universe.
Right. I always say speck of dust on a speck of dust in an infinite void, right? But we also, our small little speck of dusts can collaborate with other specks of dust, and we can become a much bigger movement. So that's, I think, what we're talking about really with collaboration as well. But it's like it's a big scientific word that usually gets abbreviated to 3 letters that are said. But and it really is. I'm pretty sure this term, it really just applies to music, and we'll find it and I'll post it in the. I'll find it. I have to just do some searching. We'll find it. But
something else, and then you think.
Right. And I remember the first time I went to see the orchestra when I was in elementary school. We went on a field trip to see the orchestra, like having that feeling. And it was one of my first, like the first feelings I had that I was like, ooh, I want to play more music, similarly to your experience. And it started me on that path of like, I started first actually as a saxophone player. In 4th grade, started playing saxophone, but I was a little tiny kid, and the saxophone was hard for me because it's a big instrument. It's a heavy instrument for a little 4th grader, right? Even an alto. So I switched to clarinet, and my fingers were like too small for the holes even. Then I just kind of like got discouraged, much like you said, with piano, like I was more discouraged, and I just said, I don't want to play music anymore. Right. And then it took a lot of my friends in middle school to start playing. And I really wanted to just kind of join my buddies, right, and play music with my buddies. It was more about the social aspect than it was about the music. So I started playing drum set because they needed a drummer, pretty much, right? And then actually, while I was learning my beginning drums. Another kid moved into our school district who was already a very good drummer. So he just ended up becoming their drummer. Right. And I was like, no, like this stinks. I'm trying to get good. Give me a chance, guys. And then really that ended up taking me on a different path because I would just kind of sit in on whatever instrument couldn't make rehearsal. So I became a multi-instrumentalist very young, learning to play bass, guitar, like pretty much whatever was around and whatever anybody needed. And I think my strength now is really more of that. I can play a lot of instruments well. I'm not a jack of all trades, master of none. That's where I've made my mark, I guess, the most. And teaching kids to have that ability to just move between instruments and everything. So yeah, that's very cool. So did you want to talk about a little bit more about like what a music director does and a conductor? What's the difference between a music director and a conductor?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, if you went to the Philadelphia Orchestra concerts, you will see that Yannick Nazet-Segun, who is their music director, conducts many of the weeks of that orchestra, and he's got to have a long-term relationship with the orchestra. A music director's contract is normally multi-years.
Okay.
And it will say, for the Philadelphia Orchestra, he will work a minimum of X number of weeks with the orchestra. Most music directors are also involved in shaping who's actually on stage. So, let's say somebody retires from the orchestra, which happens, and then they need to hire a new person to play that job in a professional orchestra. Because professional orchestras, the big ones that you hear of, like, whether it's the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, the Seattle Symphony, these are orchestras, the Sarasota Orchestra, these are orchestras that have benefits, pension plans, and they are jobs.
Yes.
If you ask a player in one of those orchestras, what is your day job, they're going to be very sad, because that is their day job. They're like baseball players.
Right.
It is their job. There are plenty of people who play baseball for fun, but this is their job. So if they're having an off day, their job is to really make sure that they don't have another off day, or that they work on. That's their number one job. That they're working towards perfection all the time.
Yes.
So the music director of, so Yannick Nazet-Segun would come in. If they're replacing a player, he will be involved in the audition process, and he'll be involved in providing whoever wins the job feedback over a process that they call the tenure process, similarly to a university, where they're evaluating that player's, how they're fitting into the orchestra, whether they're playing at the level that orchestra wants, whether they're getting along with their colleagues. Of course, they're getting along with their colleagues. That's one of the things that a music director does. And one of the other things a music director does is they might have some say into who the guest conductors are with a major symphony orchestra. So Yannick Nazet-Segun, just to go to the Philadelphia example, he may say, I'm really impressed with the work of, I don't know, name any of the conductors that you see on the roster. And those are guest conductors. So they come in, they have a one-time or maybe 2 week in a row relationship with the orchestra. They are basically contractors, independent contractors.
Right. Hired guns.
Exactly. And they may have a specialization. So if you think of someone, there are some conductors like Nicholas McGeegan who specializes in Mozart. And so they might bring in a conductor who specializes in conducting Mozart. So perhaps they're going to ask for less rich vibrato and a different way of making the sound.
Sure.
Someone who specializes in music of the Baroque, again, a different specialization. Most conductors are, if you ask them to conduct anything, they're generalists. I'll conduct anything. I'm happy to.
Sure.
I don't have a, oh yes, this is all I do kind of thing, but some conductors do.
Yes.
That's the music director is responsible for that. They're also doing, with the big orchestras or even smaller ones, they're doing fundraising. They are saying, thank you so much for your understanding of how important and wonderful this art form is. What will really help us is if we can get it out to a bigger audience, if we can advertise more. Perhaps there's this project that you might be able to support. That kind of thing. That is an important part, especially in, I think, everywhere in the world, but it's especially in the United States, to be able to reach out and communicate and find commonality between your mission and what people who are looking for something to support might believe is important. And as a music director, I'm the way I met you is, if I was just the guest conductor of the Lansdowne Symphony, I wouldn't be involved in the Delaware County Arts.
Right.
That's organization.
Which is really the marketing side of your job. The networking and marketing side of the job is the Delaware County Arts Consortium, the fundraising part.
The community.
Well. Yes, the community.
There's our colleague, and I don't remember her name, but she did a the lady who
lapidary studio. Yes.
Right,
Lisa, I believe.
Dropping hints there. I would love to do a collaborative thing with the lapidary studio because
that's very cool. Oh, we have a great arts community over here, Heron Studios and Heron Gallery Studios, where there's all sorts of artists that we can. This is really, Reuben and I just got talking, and we were like, this is really, I think, the beginning of our collaboration is getting to know each other first and see what tools each of us have and what resources each of us have and how we can use those tools and resources to help each other. So
speaking of the Philadelphia Art Museum, if a guest conductor said, "Hey, I've got this crazy idea. Why don't we play the Rocky theme with the brass, with the orchestra, the brass players, go up and play that on the staircase of the Philadelphia Art Museum?" If a guest conductor says that, they'll say, "But there's no time to organize that." If you're the music director, you say, you can, with the administration of the orchestra you work with, you can say, okay, how do we make this happen? Who do we call over there? What are some things we can do?
Yes.
So that's the job of the music director, to think big and also to pick the music a lot of the time.
Okay, great.
Repertoire. That's one of the things that everybody would love to have a hand in, and they do with some music directors. I love to get feedback. I like to get suggestions of pieces, and then I go through this book. It's called Orchestral Music Handbook, right? And it doesn't have all of the music that there is in it, but it lists the names of the piece. You can't see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
It lists the names of the pieces. This was put together by a conductor who passed away very recently named David Daniels. And he knew that what would really help conductors and orchestras around the world is to list composers and pieces that are likely to be performed by orchestras, list the instruments that are included in that piece, and how you get your hands on the music. All of these things are many-step processes, but by having it in a central area, it's very helpful. Now, his work has been carried on now online, so there's now a subscription you can get to look at the online. I'm a bit old-fashioned. I like to flip through a book and go, oh, I haven't thought about doing, what is this piece? Don Quixote and Dulcinea for solo baritone and orchestra. It's 6 minutes long and it's by Ravel. I don't know this piece. Fascinating.
Yeah. You get that and you know what? And you got to give the baritone some love, right? The baritone's got to get some solos every once in a while.
Exactly. So, and then you say, and it has these instruments, and the Lansdowne Symphony has those instruments. And is there a baritone that I was interested in bringing in? Yes. He would like to sing this piece, piece X, fabulous. But that's a short piece. So would you be interested in doing another piece that's 6 minutes long that's by Ravel that I think the orchestra would really benefit from playing from? Because what do I mean the orchestra would benefit from playing it? Ravel has a certain quality of delicacy in the way that he constructs his music that if we can spend some time working on that certain delicacy, it will inform all the other pieces that we play. That's the job of a music director, to think about the overall shape and the long-term growth of the orchestra.
Right.
So, it's a fun part of the job. There's a lot of late nights of thinking about possibilities and using your imagination. And when it comes down to it, knowing that there's probably very few really wrong answers.
Right. But a million different ways that you can go.
But there might be a best way, and you can drive yourself crazy. Yes. Just like career planning. Like if I could go back if I look over my career, I say, oh, well, that's pretty good. That worked out pretty, do I have a happy life? Yes, I have a wonderfully happy life. Was anything wrong? No, probably not. But some of the things in my life have been entirely due to chance.
Yes.
or a moment. Often, a lot of the great opportunities that I've had, there was that moment when I was filling out the application where I thought, I don't know if I'm worthy of this, or I don't know if I'm going to send that in. The tape that I sent to Tanglewood that got me into the Tanglewood Music Center, some of the best training with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and through that to the New World Symphony, which led to my meeting my wife, and now we have a wonderful family. I carried that tape around with me for 2 days thinking, I don't know if I'm going to send this in. So the moral of the story to me is always apply.
Yes. I think, and we all have those doubts, right? No matter how much you've prepared, it's natural to doubt yourself. It's natural, but that should not stop you from doing anything. I think of one thing, I did not study music in college. I studied tourism and hospitality management. So, but I picked that major because I wanted to play music so much. So I figured I'd pick like an easy major. That was what I was thinking, is that like, if I pick something like that's pretty common sense, easy enough, I'll have a lot more time to practice playing music on the side.
So you created a double major in effect for yourself.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I actually never even, I was going to do a music minor, but never even really completed the music minor because I just wanted to take the classes I wanted to take. So I took a lot of electives in different types of music, but it didn't add up to a minor, right? I didn't complete that. Someday I've said like, hey, maybe I'll go back and I'll get a degree in music.
From my time teaching in universities, it was always students like you that I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be good if we could listen to these students more? Because the program of study that they're creating is a good one, and maybe we can call it something and other students will want to take it too.
Yeah, and I think that the university system has been doing better with that, right? I know, I mean, there's a lot of music business courses, music entrepreneurship courses that are out there now, which is Berkeley does a lot of good cool programming that's outside of the box a little bit, right? Is that does more contemporary and they allow, I know NYU, I have a friend who's actually a touring musician, big time kind of rock star dude now, but he went to, I believe it was NYU, I think he went to, but he created his own major that was, it was pretty much just studying, it was like studying rock and roll, like American music in general, but focusing really on like the personalities of frontmen. So like he spent a whole semester just studying Elvis. And I'm like, that's an interesting major that he just spent a long time studying Elvis just from the history of Elvis. Cause he is a uniquely American phenomenon, right? That became popular around the world. And I mean, legendary, right? You can go to probably any country and mention Elvis, and they know who Elvis. Unfortunately, they might know Elvis more than a lot of these composers that their music has been.
He's a great artist, and I'm always impressed by someone who's, you go to anytime I find that I encounter somebody who's really good at what they do, it's always very inspiring, and Elvis is certainly like that. Not that I met Elvis.
Right. Yeah. Right. No, not me neither.
Just gone home.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned about the fundraising in community orchestras and orchestras in general in America. Now, I know. Do you think that in America we have to fundraising is more important because there isn't? I know, like in certain countries, there's more funding from the government for these the arts and culture. Do you find that it's more of a priority fundraising in the States than it is in other places, or that we depend more on the fundraising?
Well, I haven't worked in lots and lots of countries, so I don't have I'm not going to have a whole world understanding. And some of this is just what I've read and the same background as you are referring to. we benefit in America, and we should never forget this. Cultural organizations benefit from nonprofit status because it means that we're not paying taxes,
Right.
we're not paying business taxes and things. And that's the reason that cultural organizations like museums and some art galleries and orchestras and many foundations have that and they should never forget this, is because when the tax code was written, it was said, we as a country believe, or as a state, believe that these organizations contribute something more to the community that is not just for them, but it's for the community. They may be educational.
Yes.
And they need to remember that. So I always think about, we're not just doing concerts with the Lansdowne Symphony to sell tickets and make money from that. It's a community orchestra. The players aren't doing it for income.
Right.
I am paid to work and to guide and to think and to increasingly make, and it's called coming up, make videos of the orchestra. But that's not the reason we have tax-free status is because we are helping to teach, and I don't mean that in any kind of patronizing way. We are teaching and informing and enriching the community that supports us. Mm-hmm. And I think that is us having a national perspective because we are benefiting from the IRS tax code.
Right.
So that's led to some other interesting projects that I'm thinking of is in a national way.
Right. No, that's an interesting. That's an interesting take that I hadn't thought of. That the nonprofit status in America is that little extra benefit. It's a different way of doing things, but that's interesting. And that was just a curiosity.
You donate in theory.
That wasn't a kid question. That was one of my own questions. Just
cool. No, but I mean, you someone donates money to the Lansdowne Symphony Orchestra, and they can, to the extent now permissible by the law, reduce that off their taxes.
Right.
Now, some of that's been modified a little bit recently by the current administration, but maybe it will go back, maybe it won't. But there is a charitable component. That's what I mean when I say tax-free status. A contribution to a 501c3 organization.
Yes.
Which is the part
we are creating a 501c3 organization right now for the Rockdale Arts District.
Wonderful.
For educational purposes and just an awareness, the arts and culture and awareness in our area. And there are, how many? I think there's 30 to 40 different organizations, nonprofit organizations in the arts, just in Delaware County. So that there's our Delco Arts pitch thing too. It's like there's so much just in our area within a half-hour drive of you. That and talented artists that right down the street from me, there's some artists world-renowned artists that live right down the street from us. So we need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate that and bring awareness to these people, to the people, and they deserve the recognition because, as Reuben, it's a lifetime commitment to be an artist. And you're constantly learning and trying to get better and strive towards that perfection, right? Yep. Which we will never reach, but we strive towards it, right? That's the push.
The journey is the experience.
That's exactly right.
Everything in life.
So you talked a little bit about ear training and sight singing when you were younger. What? Because we really don't do. We do a little bit of sight singing. Maybe this is just I think I was supposed to be sight singing, but I have a good ear, so I was always just going by ear of what everybody else is singing around me. So what kind of ear training, sight singing did you have as a child, or do you have good resources as to where you could spend some time working on ear training and sight singing for our students?
Well, there are some I think well-constructed programs involving, say, the Kodai method of sight singing. I didn't do those. That's Kodai. It's the Hungarian composer. It looks like Kodaly, Kodally, but we say Kodai. And that seems to be really good. Now, the other book, this is on my desk just because I was sharing it with some students that I teach. It's the Rhythmic Training by Robert Starrer.
Okay, I know that one.
Really good. And if you're on smart music, there are some rhythmic exercises there, but I don't think that they're quite as strong as this. This is really, it ramps up and it doesn't stop. Some of the rhythms that you have near the end are just amazing. And it's good to be able to think of rhythm. It's good to study rhythm on its own. Mm-hmm. And it's good to study singing, music, even if you're an instrumentalist, singing music separately from your instrument, so that you're, exercising everything. It's a little bit like going, it's like a physical exercise. It's like gym class. You do push-ups, but you don't do squats and jumps and push-ups and I don't know I don't know the names of all the exercises, but you don't do them all at the same time.
Right.
Until you are going through an obstacle course. And if you replace obstacle course with challenging piece of music, that's when you are testing out all of the skills that you've worked on through a focus on rhythmic training or a focus on sight singing or these things.
Very good. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so I started as I told you I started more as a drummer first, and my bias is I think like starting on a percussion instrument at a very young age is a great thing to start, because really you can put a drum in front of a 6-month-old child with a stick and they figure out what to do with it, right? They're like, ooh, if I hit this, it makes a sound. And I'm not saying you can teach a 6-month-old rhythm. Probably not. You need a little bit more maturity than that. But you can teach rhythm at a very young age. And once you get that part of rhythm down, becoming a multi-instrumentalist and jumping into other instruments becomes much simpler, because it's I wouldn't say it's 50% of the battle, maybe not fully 50%, but it's a large part. If you've got rhythm down and you understand rhythm, other instruments become much easier to play as well. So each instrument is a tool to make music. So if you understand rhythm and you understand some basic fundamental music theory, you can make music out of any instrument. That's how I approach each instrument. Is that okay? How does this one work?
And you can't slow down. If you're playing with other people, you cannot slow down. You cannot speed up, because this is something that Michael Tilson Thomas, with Miami, and he's guested with the Philadelphia Orchestra and all over the place, where he talks about with the now. He says that his job as a conductor is to define where now is. Yeah. But our job as musicians is to play within the now together. Otherwise, I sometimes tell students, the correct note in the wrong place is unfortunately the wrong note.
Yes, right.
So that's why rhythm is crucial. Just like we rely on, you could notate the speech, that your talking and my talking as a rhythm. And we are applying the distribution of our rhythm through time as an expressive device, along with pitch. And now I'm becoming very self-conscious of how I am speaking. Right. But the rhythm is important.
And a cadence to how we speak. And
I could redistribute the rhythm in a way that it would make no sense.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Or like the wrong emphasis, right? Not just the rhythm, like the accent. Where am I accenting the word, right?
Sure. That's crucial. We all, whether we are musicians or not, we are experiencing rhythm all the time. Because time is even though the perception of time is a whole relativity and Doctor Who kind of thing, we believe wobbly, timey-wimey kind of thing. But when it comes to playing music, time is crucial. So yes, good rhythmic foundation is very, very helpful.
Unless we're talking about some free jazz sometimes where rhythm is a little bit. But
I would think, like a conversation in free jazz, the performers are, even if they're just in the moment imagining how the rhythm will be, it's not happening randomly.
Right.
it may be constructed in a way that it's supposed to sound random, but they are doing it. And if they've had the kind of rhythmic, if part of their training is the rhythmic training, they would be able to notate, and people can notate the rhythm. And it is something that was invented in the moment.
Right. Yep. One of our teachers, she's big into free improv. So she did a couple clinics on free improv, and like it opened up my eyes, because it's not, I play much more structured music, that A section, B section, C section, and where are we putting those A, B's, and C's together, and to learn how you approach it from the improv perspective. I was like, oh, I need to do some more of this, because it can be a very good songwriting tool also to just do free improvisation and see where it leads, and then take those things that you played somewhat randomly, right? And then reorganize them as something that might be more accessible, or not even accessible, just might make more sense to a casual listener, I guess.
Right. I mean, accessible. Use intuition and in the momentness, you're being really present.
Yes.
That's a really important part of conducting as well, because it's so exciting for musicians, and it's so exciting for me if each performance is slightly different. And what is it that makes that performance slightly different? Well, how the air feels, what the vapors are on a given day,
right.
whether everybody in the orchestra is happy or not. If there's an orchestra on tour and they're doing the same concert night after night in different locations, you'd better believe that if nobody slept well because the hotel they stayed in the night before was next to a noisy train station or an airport, you better believe that the performance they give the next night is going to be less flexible.
Yes.
It's probably going to be a lot closer to how they rehearsed it.
That goes same for music, touring music bands, right?
Absolutely.
When the band breaks down, you're going to have a tough show. Right?
And you'll lean in on the practice that you did,
right,
and the training that you have had. But if the wiring is up, if it's zingy because you rested well, somebody takes a little moment somewhere because they're inspired to, and you can play off that. And then when that phrase comes back in a different instrument, you can stretch it even more and stretch time. And it becomes it's so amazing when everybody on stage, whether they're 4 players in the ensemble or 100, it is at its best chamber music, and a collaborative interconnectedness. And that's, when you've got 100 people on stage, they can't all make eye contact with each other at the same time. So that's why it's helpful to have a conductor in the center like me or somebody else who's listening and, okay, let's go a little further, but let's not go too far, because I know the score, then it's going to make, if we slow down here and then speed up suddenly, then when the drums come in with that rhythm, they won't know exactly what speed to be, and then we might all be unhappy with the speed that we end up at.
Right.
And the piece will be too long, or we will lose our energy, or we have too much energy, and those 30-second notes that the piccolo has to play will suddenly be faster than they've ever practiced it.
Right.
So it's my job as a conductor to kind of help
think of each piece. I mean, you're really the whole orchestra becomes the instrument as the conductor in a way, right? Where you're
right, but except I love you now.
They're all individuals, so.
Right. It'd be like
they're all conscious and they can make their own decision. They're not just a valve.
Right. It's like if you're playing with a piano, and each of the keys is also an amazing person who has hobbies and has read books, different books to you, and experienced life, and they're at a different part of the journey. Somebody's really young, somebody's older, somebody has...
Or might have had a bad night of sleep the night before, like you said. Or
young kids, quite possibly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's great. I just love watching. I mean, I know you'll hear this, I'm sure, all the time, but like watching a conductor is one of the most fun parts of also going to the orchestras, because it's like a dance. It's a beautiful motion. And how does that develop over time?
I mean, that's something that I worked quite hard on with my teacher at school. And I continue to think about it, because you want to make sure that the motions that you're showing with your hand are going to be interpreted pretty much the same way by those across the orchestra.
Right.
I mean, there are safeguards in an orchestra. You know, the person who's playing the first violin, the concertmaster, normally they're, in an orchestra like Philadelphia or Cleveland or New York or somewhere, they're paid a bit more because they have responsibilities that the other players don't. Right. If something suddenly goes really south, or if the conductor does something that is unclear, everybody will look to that person.
Interesting.
And within each section, the principal second violinist has that responsibility for everybody playing the second violin part. And then if there's an emergency, they will look to the concertmaster. And there's all this stuff that the more closely you watch an orchestra, the more you can become aware of.
That's very
cool. The principal players within the wind section have this responsibility. The principal percussionist, the other players look to, because they're interpreting what they're seeing from the conductor. And hopefully the conductor's motions are very well thought out, and they're very clear, and they're not interfering with the music, but there is a level of interpretation that each orchestra has. And that's probably where being a guest conductor going from orchestra to orchestra would be really interesting, because every orchestra is going to have its way. That's why the Cleveland Orchestra sounds different to the New York Philharmonic, sounds different to the Delaware Symphony, to the Philadelphia Orchestra, to the Harrisburg Symphony, which is an amazing orchestra as well. But the principle is the same. And the principle is one that kind of formed as principles in the 1700s in Germany, in what's now Germany, but in those days was called Prussia.
Right.
But also within the 1600s in the Baroque music of Lully and the French courts as well. It's a long. That's why they call it classical, because it's looking back, because it's so many of its traditions and understandings are old.
Yes.
That's why it's called classical music, as opposed to I don't know what you'd call it if you didn't call it classical. Right.
You mentioned chamber music.
Oh, wait, but I haven't answered the question.
What's that?
I haven't answered the full question yet.
I'm sorry.
This was a student question.
Yes.
In general, the first beat of every measure is going to be clearly from up to down.
Right.
And then if there are 3 beats in a measure, it will be down, out, and up. If there are 4, it will be down, across, out, and up. These are patterns that have been handed down. And then what you're doing with here is hopefully sort of, the way you use your hands can indicate tone color, can indicate dynamics.
Yes. And
the way that each conductor looks, if you want to be a conductor, it's useful to watch other conductors work. You'll learn more from what you don't want to copy. Or you look at it and you hear what the orchestra is doing and you think, what they're doing isn't working. If you see something that another conductor is doing and you copy it, it may not be for you, and it won't be as effective for you as it is for them, which is really unfortunate, because wouldn't you think there'd just be one way of conducting? But there isn't. There's only one way for every...
That's like saying there's one way of coaching, right? Some coaching practices work on certain students, athletes, anything, but that's great. And I watched some video of you conducting as well before this, and also it isn't just your arms though; it's your entire body and your facial expressions and everything, right? So it is a full nonverbal communication with everything, and so I find it's also so much when you're from the audience. You don't see that facial expression. So it was cool to watch a video from the perspective where you could see you. Usually you're just looking at the back of the conductor and you can see all of the movements going side to side, but the facial expressions, like you smile brightly in this one uplifting part of the song, and you're like, yes, that makes complete sense. And
if it helps, mean, if I'm happy, of course, but also if to show that emotion helps the musicians.
Yes.
Yeah. If something's difficult and the conductor frowns at you, it becomes that much more difficult. Mm-hmm. If the conductor smiles, a difficult passage becomes easier in general, which is really interesting psychologically, but it's part of what we do. We're leading people, and leading involves encouraging.
Yes. Yes.
And the reason that a conductor is called maestro, and I don't normally take that because it's in Australia, they make fun of conductors who call themselves maestro, because Australia's a bit on the egalitarian side, but maestro is the Italian word for teacher.
Okay.
The same way that rabbi is the
yes.
word for teacher.
Right.
It just means teacher. It means master of. Right. It means you studied and you have mastered this material.
Very good. Yeah, very good. Let me see. Another thing I noticed in your bio is that you're working a lot. You're working as well with female and minority conductors to
the composers. Yes.
Yes, composers and conductors. Sorry, composers.
Yes. So one of the projects that the Lansdowne Symphony Orchestra has done is we've recorded a few of the pieces. Do I have anything here? No. We are working with the Free Library of Philadelphia. It has a special collection of 23,000 orchestral pieces. Many of them have never been recorded. And a good chunk of those are by female composers. So our current CD project, which is on pause at the moment, is to record, although we've gotten 3 or 4 pieces already recorded, by female composers. These are pieces that have never been released on a commercial CD before. And so when all said and done, we'll have a commercial CD that's accessible across the world of these pieces. The orchestra has already made a CD previously of pieces from, and there was a copyright reason we don't need to get into, but pieces written before 1923 are outside of, they're called in what's called the public domain. Right. Which is why Happy Birthday, which was published in about 1923, has been not in many movies, and now they figured out that there was an earlier publication. It is very silly and interesting. But we recorded some pieces that had never been recorded before from the Romantic era by American composers, many of which you wouldn't normally encounter. And so we did those. That was our first CD, and so this, our second CD, is pieces by female American composers from the 20th century. So that's very exciting. And I've looked through a lot of pieces at the Free Libraries. It's their Vine Street branch, the Central Library in downtown Philadelphia. And they've got all these wonderful pieces. And the library is helping to produce new editions. You know, the music that's in there at the moment isn't as easy to read for the musicians. Mm-hmm. So we're producing new editions that are very cleanly typeset and easy to read for the musicians. Cool. So we can make the best recording we can.
So it's kind of going back into the archives and cleaning up the archives a little bit and making it accessible for more people. That's awesome. Yes, I thought that was very cool that you're working on that. That's my sister-in-law is a composer. Mm-hmm. And she actually is down at University of Georgia. She teaches down there now, but she has her PhD in composition. She's amazing. She does a lot of this. It's ethereal Eastern. So it's out there, but you know, that's just where it's out there for me. For her, it makes complete sense. And so it's amazing stuff though. And I need to get deeper into it and listen to more of it, but maybe I could put you in touch with Emmy and she can, see if there's something there too. All right, I'm just going to check and see if there was any more questions that got posted. Nothing in here. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss? First of all, thank you so much, Reuben, for coming. I was like, oh, it's just going to be a half hour, 45 minutes. No, I think we could go another hour if we really wanted to. But
well, thank you. Thanks for letting me.
This was fantastic. I learned a whole lot, so I'm sure all of our students will learn a whole lot too. And Reuben is a fantastic guy, as you can see. So I'm sure if anybody has any questions, even if you see this video later and you have any questions, send them over to me and I'll be in touch with Reuben so we can make sure you get those questions answered and everything. So, well, thanks so much for spending an hour with us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks so much, Reuben. And see you, everybody. Take care.
You too.